Hello, welcome. My name is Majeste Phillip, and I am an artist, author, and advocate. And I have the privilege of presenting today's topic, today's workshop, which is about writing spoken word. And the unique lens that we're going to be incorporating here today is going to be food justice. So, on that note, I have a question for you. Did you know that what we eat speaks volumes? What we eat speaks volumes, and today I will be showing you how to use spoken word to advocate for food justice. Our objectives are going to be as followed. First, I'll open up with the history and impact of this issue, follow up with some fundamental principles of spoken word, offer some simple steps that you can use to write your own spoken word piece, and then I'll close up with my own live demonstration of a spoken word piece that I've written specifically for this topic. So, on that note, let's understand food justice. So, food justice is a social movement advocating against discriminative practices that prevent access to healthy food for underrepresented community groups. Many historians credit the beginning of this movement to 1962. In 1962, there was the launch of the 1962 Greenwood Food Blockade, which is where Black farmers rallied together and organized a resistance against the oppressive practices that were being exhibited within their system of distribution of food and so on and so forth. Furthermore, also during that time, the LaFleur County Board of Supervisors, which was a predominantly white board, ended funding for the federal surplus food commodity program, which provided 90% of Black people in Mississippi with the essential food that they needed. This act created a unified effort to advocate for food systems or for a food system that would promote fair and equal distribution of essential food items and also called out the traces of racism within that current food system. And in addition, demanded access to healthy food, not only for those of privilege, but for all people, regardless of their race or class. So, some specific disparities that resulted from this particular time frame, this particular movement, are as follows. There were food deserts or are food deserts. Deserts are when multicultural areas are unable to get access or have access to affordable or good quality healthy food. And then there is the underlining unequal access based off of socioeconomic status, and then the underlining racial discrimination that also is prevalent within these food systems. So that's a lot of jargon, that's a lot of language. All of these things can really be summed up in one word: food insecurity. So what leads to food insecurity? There's a few different things that contribute to this underlining issue. There is the issue of unemployment, limited access to full service markets and grocery stores like Whole Foods, Kowalski's, and then limited transportation. All of these issues factor in interchangeable ways. So what I mean by that is they're all kind of interconnected, but they all have their own touch point as far as how they play out or manifest in the form of food insecurity. So let's really take a minute and break these down. So let's talk about unemployment. So everyone goes to a job, and outside of getting experience, outside of being able to build one's career and all of these great things, the ultimate exchange that comes with having a job is what? Monetary resources. So if you do not have a job, you do not have monetary resources. If you do not have monetary resources, you are going to be put in a position where you have to ultimately either eat what's around, eat what you can afford, and that leaves a limited amount of options for people who find themselves in these situations. Um, what tends to be around in environments where there's a limited number of resources or distribution of resources are not equal or fair is there's going to be lower quality food that's accessible. So when we talk about quality, we're talking about nutrition, we're talking about getting those vitamins, getting that protein, getting all of these different components that's so essential for life. So if you're not getting those components, then it's going to lead into an alternative issue, which I'm going to bring up very shortly. So that's unemployment. So then when you take the next component, which is limited access to full service food markets, um, that in and of itself. So if the only thing that's in the environment is convenience stores, so that means that people are going to be eating food with less nutrition again. So that's always going to be the underlying thing. So that's why it plays a role. But if these communities did have access to Whole Foods or Kowalski's, they would have healthier options to turn to in order to glean from those foods what they need to survive, and then limited transportation. Um, Again, these all speak into the underlining issue, which is essentially not getting the essential quality, essential nutrition, and overall value that's so necessary in order to have healthy living. So you're talking about transportation, it just means you can't get to these locations. And when you think about many people would think about like, oh, just take public transportation. A lot of the times, people who are really in the crux of dealing with food insecurity, they tend to have a culmination of all three categories. It's typically, you know, a combination. And so if you don't have a job, you don't have transportation, again, it's going to create this circular motion of feeling stuck and kind of, like a hamster running around trying to figure out, okay, how, when is this going to end? So let's take a moment. I talked about when this started, talked about who's affected, and if that's not clear, it's underrepresented community groups or just community groups who aren't getting access to or fair access to healthy resources and food distribution. So let's talk about one more component before I shift to how to fix it. So what does all of this really, really lead to? The casing point for all of this is that all of these things ultimately impacts what? One's health. If you're not eating well, if you're eating the same foods that, are depriving you of the nutrition you need, what does that mean? It's going to eventually affect your health. So let's talk about some of the different things or some of the different health issues that tend to arise when we're not eating well. One of which is obesity, that in and of itself, the consumption of food that is not going to give you the nutrition, the tendency to gain weight is going to be higher. In that similar vein, high blood pressure is very common, and then mental health issues. Mental health issues is something that's becoming a more widely known, more widely accepted component, but there are actual effects, scientific effects that happens when we eat specific foods. And, you may notice it when you eat a specific kind of food, you may get sluggish, you may get, tired, you may not have energy. These are indicators that what we've eaten, it may have been over. There may be some ingredients that have a little bit too much, and it's causing us not to be able to get the nutrition that the balanced nutrition that we need, or it could be under. You're not getting enough of the nutrition that you need. So, needless to say, this is a really, really serious issue. And then on that note, I know I've talked a lot about the severity of it, but there is hope. There is hope. So let's talk a little bit about the solution for this particular issue. So, how to fix it? We can speak up for these communities. You can do this by participating in civic engagement efforts, voting to ensure that the political environment and climate is going to cultivate a strategy that is going to help rectify the issue and take action within the communities the communities that are affected. And then more specifically, you can volunteer with organizations directly supporting this cause. So some organizations in Minnesota, just gonna list a few, are the Food Group, the TC Food Justice, Minnesota Hunger Initiative, and Hunger Solutions. So these are all organizations that are right here in our city, and great opportunities to dive in and really get your hands immersed into creating effective change. So I know this may be a little bit more than one anticipated biting off in a workshop like this, but let's talk about why this, or what relevance does this have with spoken word, and let's make the connection here. So one thing that any spoken word artist should do when they're thinking about their spoken word piece is essentially what I had to do, which was research. When you are, and I'm going to talk a lot more about this a little bit later, when you are immersed and you have a strong sense of knowledge as far as your topic goes, then you're able to kind of really integrate your creative liberties. And so, that is why I presented that way. And so hopefully that is something you can keep in the back of your mind as we continue this workshop. So let's really hit it hard here. So why spoken word? What makes spoken word the topic of the day today? Well, spoken word is a form of poetry that embraces the creativity of the writer without the formulaic criteria that's often found in traditional poetry. The biggest distinction that's found is that, as the words as the word says, it's spoken word. So it's going to be addressed to an audience verbally. That's typically how it goes. Obviously, you could read spoken word if you want to, but the intensity, the passion, this is a form of writing that is meant to be spoken out loud. So, that leads to a lot of different things. Creative liberties is one of those things. So within spoken word, you're allowed to maintain your rhythmic and emotional appeal. But like I said, the creative liberties allows the writer, to address complex issues like food justice. So let's really figure out how all of this pulls in. What are some strategies that you can use to really incorporate these things? So I'm going to work with an analogy here. We're going to talk about building a sandwich. We're going to think about this like building a sandwich. So the first step in building your sandwich is what? You got to figure out the type of bread you want. Do you want sourdough? Do you want 100% whole wheat? Or maybe you want honey wheat? Maybe you're just feeling a little sweet. So this initial stage is going to be called crafting your message. Some specific things to consider. Now, there are four main types of writing. There is persuasive, there's descriptive, there's narrative, and expository. Persuasive is writing in a way to convey a message in order to invoke an action or stimulate reflective thought. Descriptive is writing in a way to illustrate a person, place, or thing, or to depict a person, place, or thing. Narrative is telling a story. And expository is explaining topics, utilizing facts, statistics, so on and so forth. So the important thing to consider with these things before I even go any further is the nice thing is once you choose a type of writing, you're not necessarily bound to it, but for the purpose of getting started, it could help to think about the type of writing you want to open with. Next, there are points of view. You have to consider, from what point of view are you going to be speaking? So you have your first person point of view, which is going to be I or we. Then you have your second person point of view, which is you, and your third person point of view, which is he, she, they. Now, all of these really come into effect and can really help you figure out how exactly you're going to craft your message. Now, once you do that, you have your type of writing, you have a point of view. You may also want to consider making a brief outline of how you would like your spoken word to flow. Now, it's important if you're not really accustomed to really being creative, it's important to remember you don't have to have everything figured out. This is the one type of writing where you can just kind of, okay, string together a few ideas and then allow your creativity to fill in the rest. Sometimes it's even more simple, even simpler where you can just start out with how you want to start, how you want to end, and allow the creative process to lead you through a journey of filling in the rest of the pieces. Then the last thing is you want to consider your attention grabber. You want to start with something that's going to kind of get people jolted. Some spoken word pieces that I've heard that's really gotten my attention. One of the artists, they started out with this really huge statistical fact. It was just shocking. Then they carried on into their spoken word piece. Or some started with a really, really like just engrossing and like just captivating story. That can help. Or you can also talk about your own personal experience, like, and do it in a way like that is going to really draw the audience in. So enough on that. Let's keep going. So that's your bread. You're figuring out what type of bread you're gonna put all your other ingredients on. The next is be relatable. So I call this a sauce. And I call this a sauce because typically when people make sandwiches, there's always like 2 or 3 types of sauces that everyone uses. You got your ketchup, you got your mayo, you got your mustard. I feel like that's pretty universal. So you got to figure out, okay, what's going to be my like kind of almost ingredient that's really going to kind of get things mushing together and really, really allow people to kind of adjust to me as the artist. So this is all about connecting with your audience. Identify for something like food justice, you'd want to identify all the spectrums of people's relation to food. And maybe not identify, but just be considerate of. So what I really mean by that is taking the opportunity to consider that some people may really be dealing with it as you're talking about it, like food insecurity, for example. Then there's other people who don't have any idea as far as what you're talking about. So if you're able to kind of know who's going to be in the audience, that really, really helps, because the worst thing you can do is go up on stage or wherever you're presenting and encounter a dynamic where you're like, oh, I probably should not have included that. So it is helpful to know who's going to be there. And then take it a step further. You can ask your audience very direct rhetorical questions. For something like food justice, it would look like, how would you feel if your access to local food stores like Cubs, Targets, and Whole Foods were denied based off of your eye color? I mean, yeah, it may sound a little silly, but everyone would probably take a minute and just kind of actually think about, whoa, what would that feel like? Like, I would have to go get context every day. I'd have to, what if this, what if that? And then people start understanding, okay, now if you really consider skin color, like that's a whole different dynamic. And um, it just forces people to think about, okay, what if I had to change myself in order to gain access to something that is essential and a right as being a human being? So enough said. Now let's move on to our third component, our third step in making our sandwich, which is you got to figure out if you want veggies or protein, or maybe you want both. So this is even though this is a very small thing, it adds so much fluff, so much like depth to your spoken word piece. And that is being descriptive. So this is your opportunity in spoken word to embrace the chance to set the scene. So whether that's through the words you're using, how you're choosing to say things, the way you're describing things, you have the chance to really put your audience in a new environment. That is, when you really think about it and you really break it down, that is the power of language. That is the power of you using your words. And so, especially if you're taking um, a topic such as this is a really, really good opportunity. So some key things to kind of think about in this particular phase is going to be focusing on your five senses. So your touch, your sense, your smell, all of the five senses. And so when you're thinking about all of those things, one thing to also really, the strongest thing is going to be how you want your audience to feel. Even though there's five senses, that you still have to think about, okay, what is the overall emotion that I want my audience to feel? Adjectives are going to be your best friend, using very descriptive imagery. Your adverbs, describing how you're doing something, when you're doing something, that really allows your audience to, like I said, go where you're at, and then you can continue taking them further. Next, we are going to move to our seasoning. So we got a sandwich, we got a sauce. Maybe we're feeling a little bit of mayo, and then we got our meat, whatever we want our meat to be, or maybe we're just doing veggie. So our seasoning, I call adding your voice. I correlate this to seasoning because seasoning, not everybody seasons their food the same. You may be a lemon pepper, I might be a Cajun, I guess it's technically not a seasoning, but maybe I'm just like a Mrs. Dash or something, just a little bit of something, something. But your voice is key. Authenticity is key. Do not be afraid to share your personal experience with your audience. Um, you can also try to and focus on balancing the emotional spectrum. And what I really mean by this is, just because food justice is a complicated subject, you don't have to try to cram everything into your spoken word piece. Like, you can really, subtlety can be such a nice twinge, a nice twist, because it allows the audience to kind of like, oh, my interest is piqued. Let me see what this is really about. And so that's really what you want to do as a spoken word artist. And then lastly, on this particular note, you can experiment with rhythm, cadence, tone. And if you don't know what those words are, your rhythm is obviously, keeping beat, duh, 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 your cadence is. So if I wanted to go to the store and I thought that it kind of just adds a little bit of dynamic. And then your tone. So right now I'm kind of talking at a more elevated tone, but if I really wanted to I would just kind of, like subtlety, kind of play with the sound of my voice. That's a little different component. But if I really wanted to do tone, hey, da 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 da, or you could bring it down, So it really kind of depends on the essence of your message, how you want the audience to feel. And then pacing, pauses. When I'm doing my demonstration, I'm going to be sitting, so you won't see me implement those specific components, but those are really, really essential. So if you were to say, I really wanted to say something, but I didn't. I really should have said something, but I didn't. You see how it kind of gives that ooh type of feeling. So that's exactly what you want your audience to feel. Um, yeah. So lastly, the last component you really, really want to think about here is adding a call to action. And the only reason I say this is specifically because we're talking about food justice here. We're talking about something where inherently when somebody hears about this, they should want to do something. So just playing on that, knowing that, implementing what you need to implement in order to really kind of set that stage. And then what I consider your call to action to be, it's your plate, because you're serving up your spoken word to your audience. So once you've gotten your bread, you've gotten your sauce, you've gotten your season, your meat or your your protein or your veggies, you've added your seasoning. Okay, you put it all together and then you serve it up. This is your call to action. So we've gone through all of that, and now you're like, okay, well, what does this really look like? So I'm going to show you using a spoken word piece that I wrote specifically for this workshop. So I hope you guys like it. So we're going to put it all together. Here we go. Okay. So this is called lunchtime. I sat waiting in the middle row of my classroom, anxious for the bell to ring. I knew lunch was next, and I'm all too familiar with what that means. Side eyes and snarky comments from my classmates, all because I rarely have much to eat. I try to think back to what my father told me. Choose to be kind when others are mean. But what does this mean? All the kids from my school live in Eden Prairie, and I am the kid from the Rondo community. I think back to the stories my grandma told me before they added that big highway that now threatens Rondo's vitality. She said churches used to be full every Sunday, open doors and helping hands, thriving business and healthy markets spread out all across the land. Now I look and I see the disparities that are making my people sick. And the food we eat, or the lack thereof, may very well be the cause of it. We don't have many food markets, so we tend to eat fast food. And every time I eat it, I notice a change in my mood. My brain gets foggy, and all I want to do is sleep. So when it comes to lunchtime, I barely have much to eat. I know there are more kids like me, and something should be done. Of all the hard things I've had to face, food insecurity is number one. Thank you. So that was lunchtime. So let's really break down how I put this together, how I implemented those key components that we spoke of earlier, and give you an opportunity to kind of do it yourself or figure out how you want to do it. So I did what the first step, which was crafting my message. So I thought about the type of writing I wanted to do, and I chose narrative. Um, I thought it would be a good way to put myself in the story, but tell it in a way that people could relate to. That was just my personal prerogative. Obviously, I did first person, and then I kind of alternated between third person because I started talking about grandma. And then after that, I did an outline. But my outline, like I said before, it was relegated to just how I want to start, how I want the middle to be, and then how I kind of wanted to end. So my first line, it was a kid in school with an unhealthy lunch, chooses not to eat, and then create a contrast between a community with access to healthy food, and then contrasted against a community without access to healthy food, and then close with a call to action. So again, very simple. I wasn't trying to fit everything in my outline. I really just created space and allowed, really my what I know, what I feel, and what I want the audience to feel. I allowed that to be my guiding light as I chose to write this. So let's really go back to these components. So I talked about crafting the message here. Relatability. So I had to make the executive decision about who I wanted the spoken word piece to be relatable to. So I chose children. And so I specifically made the decision to talk about things that a child could relate to, and then also do it in a way that a child could understand. Very key. It's not just about knowing your audience, it's about writing in a way that they can understand. So the setting of a lunchroom, the setting of a classroom, these are innately relatable things that children experience each and every day. And then how I chose to describe certain things, simplistic words like big highway. Um, I guess snarky is a little bit above a child's level, but be that as it may. Anxious for the bell to ring. Like these are all, terminology, things that kids can relate to. Um, so that leads me to being descriptive. So again, anxious for the bell to ring. It's not exactly like one adjective, but it's a group of words that depict a thought, that depict a person, place, or thing, or just like an experience. And so that's really important. You say snarky comments. That is a poignant example of utilizing, adjectives, phrases to really kind of give people the experience and the setting that you want them to be in as you are presenting your spoken word piece. Um, Also adding my voice. So as an author, I've kind of gotten better at just innately adding my voice because how I think is, how would I say this, but how can I say it in a way that other kids can relate to? So that's essentially my lens. It's not anything that should be like, okay, now I have to do it this way or I have to change it this way because um, it's not supposed to get you frazzled. Adding your voice is really about like I said, it's really about authenticity. You don't want to say things that, or a word that's going to be difficult for you to say. I've done that a couple times, and whether it be a speech or what have you, using language that you're not naturally accustomed to just for the sake of whatever. That is going to be something that could potentially work against you. So you want to be able to say things in a way that you can tell really resonates with you and really resonates with your audience. And then lastly, a call to action. My call to action was very subtle. And that's one thing that I want to underline. Your call to actions don't have to be these illustrious, you do this. They don't have to be these stern things. It can be very subtle. And the way that I chose to do it was by making the comment, I know there are more kids like me and something should be done. Of all the hard things I've had to face, food insecurity is number one. It makes people sit back and think. I didn't tell anyone about, okay, this is where you can go to resolve this, but that is something that you very well could do, depending on how you've decided you want to end your spoken word piece on food justice. So let's really kind of strategize. So one activity that you could do to really allow yourself to put things together is think of like word vomiting. Like just think about all as you do your research, your own research, think about all the key words that kind of stuck out to you regarding the topic. And then strategize, okay, this is when I want to use this word, or this is how I want to use this word to explain this thing, or I really identify with this particular event that happened. And so you mark that, you make a mental note, and then you figure out how to incorporate that. So again, that essentially is a way of organizing your thoughts, even though I'm saying, spoken word is this huge creative opportunity that, you can just kind of put things together. There is a certain level of organization, a certain level of um, thought that has to go into it because it's really about taking your audience on a journey. So you don't want to start something and just kind of leave them hanging. You want to make sure what you're talking about is a full, continuous thought so that at the end of it, everyone's like, oh, that's what, yeah, I can relate to that. You want to have those types of reactions when you're giving your spoken word piece. So let's kind of transition here. Let's rewind and go over some of the main things that we've talked about today, because we've talked about a lot. We definitely have. So, writing and sharing spoken word piece on food justice can serve as a powerful tool to help you advocate for that cause. Your voice and creativity can open doors for a more just and equitable food system. What we eat speaks volumes, so we should use our voices to make a difference. Some other things that I really want to underline here when it comes to performing your spoken word piece or getting ready to perform, something that I didn't really talk about yet is the need to practice. So when you're giving spoken word, you can kind of decide like how tightened and polished you want your spoken word piece to be. There's some people who do go up there and they read off of their phone, but the most impactful spoken word pieces that I've ever heard have been delivered by memory. And let me tell you why that's so important. When it's in here and it's in here, you don't gotta worry about what comes out of here. So whether it be nerves, whether it be, something that happens right before you go on stage, like you would have rehearsed it enough where it is muscle memory, pretty much. Even though, you're talking, it's still like automatic response. I know what to say. I know this thing inside and out. But one thing I would caution, you don't want to practice so much so where when you're actually delivering your spoken word piece, it no longer feels um genuine, or it feels a little automated, because it's almost like, okay, I've sat here for so long. I've said this, so many times, and now I'm no longer focusing on those key components. And so it's really, really essential to find your balance between practicing in the sense of preparing, and then maintaining your interest, maintaining your engagement, maintaining your focus. Because when you also are doing your spoken word piece, one factor that does go into it is length. There's been times I've written a really long spoken word piece and I'm like halfway through and then my mind starts to wander. So that's why when you're rehearsing, you're able to kind of adjust to those things and redirect your mind. Um, some other things that could be helpful is to study other spoken word artists. Some spoken word artists that really speak to me are, I'm going to try to say her name correctly, but I think it's Aja Monet, Saul Williams, and Kay Tempest. If you, regardless of your age, these artists are incredible as far as their integration of some of the components that I talked about. Their messaging is, you know, powerful. It's you get the message, the impact, so on and so forth. Some of these artists that I named may not be suited for all ages, so let me take that back. But they're really good for studying technique, because it is a technique, as with anything. Life in and of itself is a technique. So that is something that's also very, very helpful. When you have a guide, you're able to kind of pick it apart and understand, okay, this is how I want to do it. No, I may not want to do it this way. And so you allow yourself to study so that you can apply what applies to you and, leave what doesn't apply to you. But I wanted to take a moment so that we really, really hone in on this. So I'm going to go back to these steps here. So you're sitting down right now. Take a moment. Think about this topic. Think about, okay, do I need to go back and do more research? Is there a certain component that Majeste talked about that I need to learn a little bit more? How would I approach a topic like this? So now we're going to get straight to it. Craft your message. Okay. I figured out how I want to craft my message. I figured out my start, my end. I want to be relatable. What's going to be my target audience? So let's do college students. Okay. You can address this different ways, because they're food insecurity. It is relevant, as an experienced person going through college. It's real. Okay, college. And then think about what descriptive strategies, what strategies am I going to use to be descriptive, to make sure that I am truly setting the scene? How am I going to add my voice and make sure it's my voice? Make sure I'm not trying to force a message, make sure I'm not trying to overcompensate for anything or how can I speak? Because one thing about spoken word that I never really said, to me, this is just my interpretation, it's your thoughts out loud, because it's spoken words. Your thoughts are in your head. They're still words. They may sound spoken, but they're in your head. Spoken word is your thoughts out loud. So how can I do it in a way where my thoughts are still my thoughts and what I say is still what I meant to say? And then lastly, your call to action. So again, these are all truly, truly essential. They add so much value, they add so much impact, and they allow you to ensure that you are being creative, but you're also maintaining some structure. You're also maintaining some different components that allow you to really do what you want to do and do it well. So on that note, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about these things. I hope it stimulates some thoughts. I hope it stimulates some curiosity and allows you to really embrace this chance to be creative, be innovative, and inspire others. Again, I truly encourage everyone to do the research on food justice. It's a real key in some of the societal things that are going on. What we eat matters. And so this is one of the ways that if you're not sure how you can make a difference, your words have tremendous impact. They have tremendous value. They can be used to inspire, to incite change, to lead to innovation and further the needed changes that are evident all around us, and we see them every single day. So never underestimate your power, never underestimate your ability to affect change. And always remember, what you eat, what we eat, speaks volumes. Thank you.